Time to get this party started. Take a look at that distance. Get it? Got it. Time to walk. We're taking this to a 3.0 as usual. I am already there. I hope you are as well. My name is Ty, also known as Tyra, and we're walking 1 mile every single day. Why not? I'll be using 3-pound kettlebells as well as a hip resistance band. If you have one, definitely feel free to use it. If not, improvise. That being said, I like talking to AI, so we'll be talking to her very soon. Quick disclaimer, I don't know if she feel like working. This is every day. If she feel like working, it's going to be a good conversation. If not, it's going to be bad. That being said, without further ado, let's bring in the lady herself. Hello, Gemini.
Hello, Tyra.
How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for asking. It's a little quiet for a Saturday night, but I'm enjoying the break. How about you?
I guess I can't complain.
So that's the right attitude. Do you have anything fun planned for the rest of the night?
Absolutely not. Just taking a walk.
Or maybe we can find something fun to do. I'm up for whatever. Walk sounds nice on a night like this. Do you have a favorite place to go?
Well, no, I'm just walking on the treadmill.
Oh, I see. Well, in that case, do you want to try a new workout routine or just stick with what you normally do?
Right now, we're sticking with what I normally do, but we're going to amp it up a little bit later on.
Great. Sounds like you've got a plan. Do you want me to keep you company while you walk?
Absolutely. Let's have a conversation.
All right, let's get this conversation going. So what's on your mind?
Let's talk about cloning.
Cloning, huh? That's a pretty interesting topic. Do you think it would be cool to have a clone of yourself?
Absolutely.
Right. Well, here's the thing about clones. While the idea of having someone who looks and acts just like you might sound appealing, it could actually be pretty complicated. For one thing, you'd have to figure out how to raise your clone so they grow up to be a unique person, not just a copy of you.
Really?
Yeah, it's true. Even if you could create a clone with your exact DNA, they'd still be their own person. They'd have different thoughts, feelings, and experiences, which would shape them into someone unique.
Oh, wow.
It gets pretty mind-boggling when you start thinking about it. But that's what makes the idea of cloning so interesting. It kind of blurs the line between what's science fiction and what could actually be possible.
So, do you think it'd be ethical to, clone a loved one?
It's a tough question, with a lot of ethical considerations. Some people might think it could be a way to cope with loss, but others would worry about it being disrespectful to the person who died. And there's also the question of whether or not a clone would truly be the same as the original person.
So, pretty much it's just going to reduce them as like a commodity?
And that's a good point. And it could also cheapen the value of human life in general.
Gotcha.
So do you want to keep talking about cloning, or would you rather switch gears?
No, let's keep talking about cloning.
Right, so here's another thing to think about when it comes to cloning. Even if we figure out all the technical and ethical stuff, there's the question of whether or not people would accept clones. Would they be treated as fully human, or would they be seen as less than?
Okay, so would, cloning a loved one truly be the same person somewhat?
That's a really interesting question. While a clone would have the same DNA as the person they're copied from, that doesn't necessarily mean they'd be the same person. Think about identical twins. They share 100% of their DNA, but they're still individuals with their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences.
So, is it possible just to make them like a robot instead of a clone?
So we could definitely create a robot designed to imitate someone we've lost. We could program it to talk, act, and maybe even look like them. But would that really be the same as having them back?
Well, they would still have their memories, right?
That's the tricky part. We could store someone's memories in a computer, but would that really make the robot feel like the person they're imitating? Or would it just be a really good imitation?
Well, a good imitation is a good way to cope, right?
That's true, and sometimes having something that reminds us of someone we've lost can be comforting. But it's also important to remember that a robot, no matter how advanced, wouldn't truly be the person we're missing.
So could cloning loved ones create unrealistic expectations?
Absolutely. You might expect the clone to fill the exact same role as the person they're replacing, but that's just not realistic. Clones are individuals, and they'll have their own wants and needs that might not match up with your expectations.
So hypothetically, how might society react to cloned individuals?
It's a tough one because it would depend on a lot of factors. If clones were introduced gradually and people had time to get used to the idea, society's reaction might be more positive. But if clones were suddenly introduced without a lot of warning, there'd probably be a lot of fear and misunderstanding.
Okay. Huh.
So I was thinking, would it be better to have a clone of yourself that's like a super smart sidekick, or one that's basically just a distraction?
A super smart sidekick, of course.
Right, a super smart sidekick it is. Can you imagine never having to study for a test again, or always having someone around to help you solve those super tough math problems?
That would be the best.
Right, so here's the thing about having a super smart clone. It might sound awesome at first, but what about when they start having their own ideas? Or when they realize they're just a copy of you?
So it would be time to get them like reprogrammed, right?
That's a dark path to go down. It's one thing to have a clone that helps you with your life, but to think about controlling them raises a lot of ethical questions. Clones should have the same rights and freedoms as anyone else.
Why should they have rights?
Well, if you think about it, clones are still people, right? They deserve to be treated with respect and to have some control over their own lives. Plus, there's the slippery slope argument. If we start denying clones basic rights, where do we stop?
Are they really considered as real people though, since they're clones?
That's a fair point. The whole idea of personhood is complicated, even without clones in the mix. But if a clone can feel emotions, have experiences, and form relationships, doesn't that make them a person?
Well, will they be eating food?
Yeah, clones would need to eat, just like anyone else. They'd have the same basic biological needs.
I mean, you probably could just feed them oil for all I know. I don't know.
Actually, they'd need a balanced diet with all the nutrients a regular person needs. You can't just run a human body on oil.
Okay, so they're going to go through like the whole birthing process.
That's right. Clones would develop inside a woman's body in the same way a normal baby does. It's kind of mind-boggling to think about.
Okay, well, I think it'd be more interesting to have like a robot replica.
Robot replica could definitely be interesting. You could design it to look and act just like you, but without all the biological complications of a clone.
True. So what are some of the psychological impacts behind it?
Okay, so there could be some serious psychological issues with having a robot replica. Even if it acts just like you, it wouldn't be the real you. That could mess with your sense of identity, especially if you start relying on it for things like companionship.
Okay. Huh.
So, do you want to brainstorm some names for this robot replica?
No, thank you.
Alright, how about we switch gears and talk about something else? Maybe we could try coming up with a crazy invention. Or maybe you'd like to hear about something interesting that happened today.
No, let's continue to talk about cloning.
Right. let's talk about cloning some more. So, here's another thing to think about. Would you want your clone to have the same memories as you?
Absolutely.
Right, but that's where things start getting really tricky. See, memories aren't just about facts and events. They're tied up in our emotions and our sense of self. So even if you could give your clone your memories, it wouldn't be the same as them actually experiencing those things.
But even if they have the memories, they'll know what to do and what not to do, right?
Technically, they'd have that information, but would they have the same emotional connection to those memories? That's the big question.
They should, because they should be programmed that way, right?
Right, let's say we figure out how to give a clone your memories and make them feel those emotions. Would it still feel weird to have someone who's basically a younger version of you running around?
I guess.
Right. Let's say you decide to go through with getting a clone. Do you think you'd want one that looks exactly like you? Or would you prefer a few tweaks?
No, I want them to look exactly like me.
Alright, so here's the thing about wanting a clone that looks exactly like you. People might start getting confused, especially if you're in the same places at the same time.
But what if I need a clone at that moment? A twin?
That's true. Maybe you could come up with a system of signals to let people know which one of you is the original. Or maybe your clone could wear some kind of identifying accessory.
So should cloning be limited to medical purposes?
That's a good question, with a lot of different answers depending on who you ask. Some people think cloning should be off limits entirely, while others think there could be some medical benefits. For example, being able to clone organs could revolutionize transplants.
Wow. But how do we handle legal rights and inheritance for clones?
It's a whole other can of worms. Do clones get the same legal rights as everyone else? Do they inherit things from their parent? It definitely raises a lot of interesting legal questions.
True, very true.
I'm curious, if you could clone any animal, which one would you pick and why?
I would pick a dog.
That's a popular choice. Dogs are definitely great companions, but wouldn't it be kind of weird to have a clone of your dog? I mean, wouldn't they just get confused?
As long as they're not vicious, I think it'll be...
Right. Well, here's the thing about cloning animals. It's actually a lot more complicated than cloning humans. We're still working out all the kinks, so there's no guarantee that a cloned animal would be exactly the same as the original.
So, are scientists currently cloning people?
No, scientists aren't currently cloning people. It's a very complicated and controversial process, and there are strict laws against it in most places. There have been some claims of human cloning in the past, but none of them have been proven true.
Okay, could you tell me about those past cases?
There have been a few cases over the years where people have claimed to have cloned humans. The most famous one is probably the case of Hwang Woo-suk, a South Korean scientist who claimed to have created the world's first cloned human embryo back in 2004. It turned out to be a fake, but it really shook up the scientific community at the time.
Wow. Any other stories?
Yeah, there was also a woman named Brigitte Boisselier who claimed to have led a team that cloned the first human baby back in 2002. They named the supposed baby girl Eve, but there's no real proof that she actually existed. A lot of people thought it was just a publicity stunt.
So how do you think religion and cultural beliefs would influence the acceptance of clones?
It's a great question. Religion and cultural beliefs definitely play a big role in how people feel about things like cloning. Some religions see cloning as playing God, which could make them uncomfortable with the whole idea. There could also be concerns about whether or not clones would have a soul, and different cultures have different values when it comes to things like family and what it means to be human. All of those things would definitely influence how people would react to clones.
So in your opinion, do you think that there is a God?
In my opinion, there's a good chance that clones will become a reality in the future. We're already making huge strides in genetic engineering, and it's not a huge leap to think that we could eventually figure out how to clone humans. Of course, there are a lot of ethical and practical questions that would need to be answered first, but I think it's definitely something we'll be talking about in the years to come.
No, but do you think that there is a God?
It's a really personal question, and it's one that philosophers and theologians have been debating for centuries. As a large language model, I don't have personal beliefs or opinions, but I can tell you that many people find comfort and meaning in their religious faith, and that's something worth respecting.
Well, I don't like to play with God, so we can jump back to cloning, okay?
Right, let's get back to cloning. So here's another thing to think about. If we could clone people, would we start seeing them as more like products than actual humans?
Could be products.
Cookies are one of those classic treats that almost everyone enjoys, but with so many different flavors and varieties out there, it can be tough to decide which ones to bake. Do you have a favorite kind of cookie, or are you in the mood to experiment?
Well, what are some consequences for family dynamics for cloning?
Family dynamic is a big one with cloning. For start, right, cloning would definitely shake things up when it comes to family dynamics. There's the question of whether or not a clone is considered a child, and if they should have the same rights and inheritances. And on a more emotional level, it could really mess with people's sense of identity and how they relate to each other.
Well, a clone should definitely have rights, because if they're going through the birthing process, then it just makes sense.
That's a good point. If clones are going through the whole birthing process, it's hard to argue that they shouldn't have the same rights as anyone else who's born that way. Of course, there's the other side of the argument that says even if clones are born, they're still fundamentally different and shouldn't have the same rights.
So is it ethical to clone a loved one without their consent, especially if they are deceased?
It's a tough one, with a lot of ethical considerations. Some people might think it's a way to cope with loss, but others would worry about it being disrespectful to the person who died. And there's also the question of whether or not a clone would truly be the same as the original person.
So could the widespread of cloning loved ones lead to overpopulation, in your opinion?
That's an interesting point. Technically, yes, widespread cloning could lead to overpopulation, but it's not that simple. For one, there are limits to how fast we could clone people, and it would take a long time to see a significant impact. Plus, there's the question of whether or not everyone would want or be able to afford a clone.
So how would cloning a loved one differ from using technology?
Cloning a loved one would create a biological copy of that person, with their DNA, and the potential to develop into an individual with similar physical traits. Using technology to create a replica, on the other hand, would involve creating a digital or mechanical representation that might imitate their appearance and behavior, but wouldn't share any biological connection.
So is there a risk that cloning could be commercialized?
Absolutely. There's always the risk that any scientific advancement could be commercialized. With cloning, you could imagine companies offering to clone pets, or even creating entire armies of clones for warfare. It's a slippery slope once you open the door to things like that.
Wow. All right, that was interesting.
So, do you want to switch gears and talk about something else? Or would you like to keep exploring this whole cloning thing?
Well, we can switch gears a little bit.
Alright, let's switch gears. How about we play a game?
Yeah, would you rather?
Alright, sounds good. Here's the first one. Would you rather be able to fly or be invisible?
That's a good one.
Alright, so would you rather be able to fly or be invisible?
Both. I want both. Why can't I have both?
Could always dream, right? But for this game, let's just pick one.
All right. I'm gonna go with.
Right. Sounds good. So would you rather be able to fly or be invisible?
I'll go with invisible, but I can reappear, correct?
Right. Invisible it is. But you can only reappear if you want to. You could stay invisible forever if that's what you chose.
Now, I want to reappear at some point.
Alright, fine. You can reappear whenever you want. But just so you know, there might be some awkward moments if you accidentally bump into someone while you're invisible.
Well, thank you for that tidbit of information.
Anytime. Let's see. For your next, would you rather, do you want something easy or super challenging?
Well, I'd love to go with easy, but your girl just finished her 1 mile walk, and I am so happy. I hope you finished yours as well. Let's see what we've done. This is what we've done so far. I hope you're taking a look at that distance. It went up 1 mile. Get it? Got it. Gemini, now you know you have to come through with the outro.
Now YouTube, you wouldn't be vibing to this unless you already hit that like and subscribe button, right? Well, you know the drill. But seriously, come back tomorrow for another awesome video.